Today we have Brother Antonio with us. He's going to share his journey with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And let's start from the beginning. How did it all start?
From the beginning, you're talking about the book of Genesis beginning and then moves on in redemptive history. No, I'm joking. The beginning, I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I wasn't raised in a Catholic home. I wasn't raised in a Muslim home. But later in my life, when I was about 17 or more or less 18 years old, I was tired of my life decisions, things that I was doing. I was, in and out of jail, doing things that I know for a fact I shouldn't have been doing. And so the weight of my sin was so overbearing upon my shoulders. And I remember a few of my friends were claiming to be Muslims, but they weren't really practicing Muslims. They told me about it, and it sounded interesting enough for me to go to the local mosque to go check out when I got off of work. And when I entered the doors of the mosque, looking upon the walls, I was anticipating somebody to come talk to me because I was just a lost soul. And sure enough, some little Arab man, probably short, came to talk to me. And the first thing he denies the biblical doctrine of the Trinity. He just flat out denies what Christians were. And I'm just like, I didn't really care because I wasn't a Christian, so it didn't matter to me. He pulled me into his office, explained to me Islam, and told me that Islam could change my life. And that's what I needed the most in my life, was a change in my heart, a change in my life, change in my actions. And, he told me, and he showed me how to take the Shahada in Arabic. I didn't know too much about Arabic or this whole idea. You got to learn it in Arabic and stuff like that, and you got to say it in Arabic. But I still took it in Arabic.
You did the Shahada?
Yeah, I did the Shahada.
On that day?
On that day.
So how much time you had to learn about Islam?
Not very much time.
Like 1 hour, 2 hours?
Maybe about an hour. He told me about Islam, but he didn't tell me everything. It wasn't until years later.
I mean, 1 hour, what can you learn in 1 hour?
He just told me how Islam is a religion of peace, how Muhammad is the final messenger, how he comes in the same line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jesus. And so being from a Western society, we're kind of used to those terms anyways.
Right.
But I had no understanding of them anyways. So I was like, okay, it sounded like, okay, this is a religion that I can accept. And so he went through the Shahada with me, and I took my Shahada, he gave me my Quran, and it started another journey in my spiritual life.
So did you understand what you were saying when you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah?
How can I? I could barely speak Spanish, and I'm full Mexican, let alone Arabic all by itself. So
You just were repeating after him.
Exactly. I was just repeating after him.
And then after that, you started practicing Islam?
Yeah, I got
On that
some
day
books.
even?
On that day. Even within the next hour, I went and I got the books. He gave me a few books, and I got some books from their library on prayer and stuff like that. And I was learning the 5 pillars. Like he didn't even he told me about the 5 pillars. And that whole Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca,
Right.
I was excited about, because I was like, oh, I could go, to Mecca, and it seemed really fascinating to me.
Right.
So
it was a new experience for somebody
yeah.
who lived, a hard life, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, can you talk a little bit about your past before Islam, just a little bit to give us an idea why you needed a religion in your life?
Okay, yeah. I wasn't raised in any religion whatsoever.
So you were just
regular, just secular.
Okay.
The problem is with many Muslims now today, they accuse everybody in the West as being Christian, and that's not true. How can I be Christian when I'm breaking into houses, when I'm robbing people, when I'm doing drugs, when I'm selling drugs, when I'm doing all those things that, it's clear evidence that I wasn't religious whatsoever. So I needed a change in my life because
you were doing these things.
Yeah, oh yeah. A lot of things that my mother does not know about that I would be ashamed to tell my mom about, because it was this, how can I do such things? How can I hurt such people? How can I do these things that would just bring shame and just heartache and pain to my family? And So I was doing those things privately. I knew I needed a change in my life. And so,
Why didn't you go to a church? Why you went to a mosque?
you know, in all honesty, that is the question of the ages. Why a mosque? Why not a church? I put it all in God's hands. God led me through Islam, to have what it means to have a true faith in Him, what it means to have and to worship a true and living God. So I don't know why. Why a mosque? I don't know. But I went to a mosque. So
you did the prayers that day. How did you do the prayers and you don't know Arabic? You don't know
yeah,
Islam? You
exactly. That's the whole funny issue about it. Is like, how can I do? What is it? It's not called. Got your 5 daily prayers.
The wudu.
The wudu.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will practice that stuff from the books, like, okay, do this and wipe your hands and do all that stuff. And so I remember working at a factory job, an ink factory job, and I'm just full of ink, full of dirt. And I can remember stopping my ink mill, one of my machine presses, and I was just like, okay, I gotta pray. So I would go wash up, and despite the filthiness of the chemicals, I still try to wash, still try to do what I do, and pray. But my prayers were in English.
Oh, you prayed in English?
I prayed in English.
Not in Arabic?
Not in Arabic.
And you know that is not accepted within
Yes.
Islam.
Yes, I know that now, but I didn't know it back then. Back then, all I had was just a heartfelt cry out to God. And if Allah could not understand my prayers, then that just shows the deficiency upon Allah. Because doesn't God understand everybody? All prayers, everybody at once.
Didn't anybody comment on that? Like, since you...
Not till later in life, when I started, when I became a Christian and started talking to other Muslims, they're telling me that I wasn't sincere, telling me I couldn't pray to Allah in English or do the prayers in English and stuff like that. Like, I understand what they're saying about it, but at that time, I thought I was, being a good Muslim, as far as at that time, because all I did was just have my Quran. I wasn't a Quran onlyist or anything like that. I had my Quran. I had some other books. I didn't really have too much of the Hadith or anything like that, Bukhari or anything like that. Wasn't until much later, until I left Islam, that I had to learn about all this other stuff, because now I'm talking to Muslims about Jesus, but I need to know what I'm talking about when it comes to Islam.
Right.
So
you were you just following what others are doing when that day when you started doing, just watching them and like...
Yeah, pretty much.
Can you tell me a little bit about it? I'm eager to know.
Yeah. Well, the problem is somebody didn't come alongside of me and it struck me. I was just watching individuals, how they prayed, what they were doing, and I figured, okay, I'll copy them. So I started to mimic and copy what was I seeing in the mosque. I thought it was strange. Why is everything in Arabic and I can't understand nothing? With no translator. Nobody's even translating this stuff in English where I can understand. And so...
You went to khutbahs as well in the Friday sermon?
Yeah.
Was it in English or in Arabic?
It was in Arabic as far as I could remember.
And you still go there and be there?
I still went because I worked many factory jobs. And so Islam was my form of spirituality, in which I went to the mosque, I went by myself, and usually by the time I got to the mosque, some of the times it was already emptied. But so I'll be the only one in there on my face, praying to Allah, crying out, because I needed something more in life. And since Islam was my first religion, my first experience, I felt that it was correct at that time. Islam is true. Islam is about peace. Why not? That's what they told me. So that's what I knew.
Did you learn more as time went by?
Yeah, of course. I learned more, but that which I was learned, it was extremely filtered through a particular lens, because my learning and my understanding on Islam, and mainly about Christianity, because I was also learning about Christianity, but mainly from Mamati Dot. And so I was learning Islam, I was learning Christianity, other worldviews through the lens of Islam.
Why you learn about Christianity from Ahmad Didat? What?
Well, because he was the only one talking about it, you know? I mean, I don't know, but he was telling me about it,
Were you preparing yourself to do da'wah and call Christians to be Muslims?
I was preparing myself more or less because I wanted to learn. And I was learning something new in my life. And so I was very vocal about it. I would tell everybody I worked with, I was probably a nuisance. People probably was just looking to fire me because that's all I did was just talk about God. And as soon as people found out that I'm a Muslim, then they kind of was like, oh, we're not going to talk to him no more. But yeah, so call it dawah, call it whatever you want to call it. I was just telling people about my newfound faith.
So how did it go after
that? Big sigh because I became more depressed. I became more emptied in my heart. Every time I knelt down in prayer, I was convincing my own heart, my mind was convincing my heart that this was the right way. I remember waking up for early prayer, and I remember praying down to Allah, bowing down to Allah, and I could remember crying one time, saying, my mind is trying to convince my heart.
Right.
My heart is screaming out, it's depressed. My mind is, this is right. This is about God, this, and stuff like that. And the more I became depressed, the more I started having dreams of Jesus Christ that I could not explain as a Muslim, as I would call myself.
And you had no background in Christianity.
Nothing. No background. Like, I was learning Christianity from Ahmad Didat. So that was my understanding of Christianity.
Then suddenly you started getting dreams about Jesus Christ.
Yeah, suddenly started getting dreams of Jesus Christ.
Why not? Like Muhammad or somebody?
I don't know. You know, another question for the ages. Why not Muhammad? I don't know. Those dreams of Jesus, but I couldn't explain them or anything like that. So
you knew it was Jesus.
I woke up with the impression that this was Jesus, not with my theological categories of that this is the second person of the Trinity or my certain understanding of things, but I woke up with the impression, some inner feeling that this was Jesus.
What did you see?
A few dreams. I could explain 3 of them really vividly. I remember one night I'm swimming in an ocean all by myself. And as I'm swimming, I could see a figure sitting on a big rock. And he's fishing for me. Just fishing for me. I heard no voice, I heard no words. I just seen a figure fishing for me. And I woke up and I realized that was Jesus. I didn't realize that, oh, Muhammad is calling me to prayer or anything like that. I realized that was Jesus. Another dream in which I had very vividly, I was walking up a big mountain and that same figure turned around, calling me to follow him. And once again, I woke up with that impression that that was Jesus. Another dream I had, very interesting because I could say I was in jail at this time because I had warrants out for my arrest before I took my Shahada that I was avoiding the law for a long time. I figured they have to come get me because I'm not going to turn myself in. Call it what you may. But I remember I'm standing there and I see in the clouds coming a man on a white horse in the clouds with a big sword. And I could remember me going around people and telling them, Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming. And I woke up and got out of jail. So, but, you know, it was so many instances.
So you started seeing dreams while you're still a Muslim?
Yes.
And what did you think about it?
I don't know.
So did you start thinking about Christianity or you just continued to be a Muslim?
I continued to be a Muslim. It wasn't until I debated some Christians on some basic stuff, some basic arguments. I seen some men going door to door evangelizing the individuals. And I heard them talking about Jesus. So I figured, well, yeah, I know about Isa. I know about this figure because it was filtrated through my understanding of what the Quran says and what these other books were telling me and what Ahmad Didat told me about Christianity. So I was just like, oh, they're wrong. how can Jesus be praying if he's God? Didn't make sense to me. You know, how can he be God if he's asking God for miracles? Didn't make sense to me. And so as I talk to these individual men, you know, we go back and forth in circles. I don't think these men were very knowledgeable on Islam whatsoever, or my particular perspective. But one individual in particular, he gave me the Bible and he said, read this one verse, read it out loud. So I was like, okay, sure, no problem, let me read it. And it was John 14:6. Jesus replied, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man should come unto the Father but by me. When I read that verse, it was as if I heard a voice for the very first time in my life. These men, they didn't convert me. I didn't say no sinner's prayer. I didn't sign my name on a card or anything like that. All I told this gentleman, one of these gentlemen there, his name is Keith. 10 years later, kind of God wraps that story up with Keith. Very interesting. And Keith looked at me. I looked at Keith. I shook his hand. I said, you know what? I'm seeking after truth. He says, good luck on your journey. And I left the building with a doubt, who is Jesus now? For the first time in my life, now I'm questioning, is there something more to Jesus? Is there something more to Jesus? I moved to a different city. Other dreams were occurring, other vivid dreams. I also remember I had a dream one night in which I was sitting in my room and somebody came into the room holding the Quran. I would like to say it was Jesus. I would like to say it was somebody. I don't know, because I didn't wake up with the impression that was Jesus. Somebody just had a Quran and they pointed at me and was like, do you really believe this book? And then I woke up. You know, it was as if that person was like telling me this is not the right book. And so
here I am. Well, I'm listening to these stories and these dreams. For me, I can see you were not satisfied in Islam. You didn't have the peace you were looking for. You didn't have the change of heart that you were seeking.
Definitely.
And you said earlier that you were depressed. The more you prayed, the more you practiced Islam, you were depressed. Can you talk to me about it? Why you were depressed?
As to the reason why I became depressed,
yes,
the more and more I prayed 5 times a day, from what I understood at that time, I felt Allah was further and further and further away. It was as if he did not hear my prayers. And I'm crying out to God. I'm literally in tears crying to God. And if I felt as if he did not hear my prayers, I was praying to a brick wall many times. It was as if my prayers couldn't get any higher than the ceiling of the roof I was at. And so so I just became more depressed.
So you were not satisfied as a Muslim?
I wasn't satisfied, but it wasn't really about my personal emotions. It's about truth. Truth, regardless if you're happy with it or not, truth is truth.
Right.
You know, and so even though my heart was telling my mind something else, I still practiced, I still did it because I felt that this was true, you know. And
so when you were like, you had some, let's say, candles on your way, one of dreams, friends planting seeds in your heart saying that Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. And then how that seed or those seeds flourished in your heart.
Well, scripture is very true. The Apostle Paul writes, one man plants, another man waters, but the Lord brings the increase. It's all according to God's timing.
Right.
And so how that germinated, how that became more watered and stuff like that. One night I was depressed and I was like, you know, God, do you love me? Does God love me? And so I looked in the Quran and it was always based on some form of stipulation. If I did this, if I did that. And I felt that I was doing that. I was fasting for Ramadan. I was telling people about Islam. And I felt that I was being righteous enough. For my external means, I was holy, I guess, you know, without being sinless. But I was trying my best to be righteous. But I just felt that it just wasn't working whatsoever. I asked God, God, do you love me? And I remember there was a knock on my front door. It was my, I went and opened the door. It was my step uncle, Ricky. And the only thing he said to me, was the Lord, yes. I don't know what it meant at that time. He said the Lord, yes, and he walks away.
It was a dream or it was
No, this is real.
Real.
Yeah, this is real. He said the Lord, yes, walks away. And I go back in my room, still asking God, do you love me? I looked in the Quran. It's always based on some form of stipulation, but I always had that voice in the back of my mind. I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. And so I went to the Bible and I looked in the back of the book for the word love. Well, let me see where it takes me. And it led me to Romans 5:8. God demonstrates his love for us. While yet we're still sinners, Christ died for us. I didn't understand certain biblical theological issues right away. The only thing I knew was that the God of the Bible loved me unconditionally, despite me. And even though I was trying to be righteous enough, but I knew I was still a sinner. For some reason, I had this weight upon my shoulders that Islam could not alleviate. But the God of the Bible showed me that he loved me despite my shortcomings, despite my inadequacies, despite my sin. That the God of the Bible is the true God, and that God I wanted to believe in. I didn't understand the Trinity just yet, or the deity of Christ, or why Christians come to such and such conclusions. It wasn't until a little bit later that I studied more and more and more and more that I've come to these convictions. But at that moment, when I finally put away the Quran, I put away the Quran for good, is because the deficiency of the love of Allah is completely lacking, despite what Allah is all loving, or whatever one of the names is.
So on that time, you were done with Islam.
Yeah.
You put the Quran away.
Put the Quran away.
Did you stop praying the Islamic prayer and doing the Islamic rituals?
Yeah.
Did you tell anybody in the Muslim community?
I didn't have Muslim community around me anyway. So like, this was my personal journey. And the only reason other Muslims found out at a community college, because I was very vocal. They all call me, that's the Tony. I didn't even have like, oh, that's the Christian guy. They called me the Tony. And when they said the Tony, they knew I was a Christian guy going around telling everybody about how Islam is false and Jesus is the only way. So did you pray? How did you start the rest of the journey? Like you are done with Islam. Yes.
You found out that Jesus is the truth. And how did you start that journey?
Well, the basic prayer. It doesn't have to be a proper formula. It was just, God, I believe in you. I believe in what Jesus did for me, that he died on the cross for my sins. And that's how it began. It wasn't a sinner's proper prayer or anything like that. It was just like a transference of from that God to that God. It was like a transfer, so it's like a snap of a finger, So
you became a Christian. You gave your life to Jesus Christ in your way.
In my way, I didn't understand I was probably still a heretic categorically when I left Islam, because I still believed in the oneness of God. I still believed in literally the oneness. I still rejected the Trinity for at least 2 years, despite I left Islam, because I knew Jesus was not the Father. I couldn't understand why Christians calling him God if he's praying to God. Who's the Father? And so I learned later that, okay, there's a Father who is eternal. There's a Son also who is eternal. There's a Holy Spirit who's also eternal. And so it wasn't until later that my Trinitarianism, or my view on the Trinity, I became a biblical believer without the term Trinity being in the Bible. That was
but let's face it. Like, do you need the Trinity at that time? Do you need doctrine, or you need the love of God? Like sometimes
at that. Yeah,
discussing the wrong thing in the
well, sometimes
wrong
Christians
time.
discuss the wrong things.
I know.
I just needed the love of God. I
Right.
needed the truth of God, and I needed Jesus. I didn't need doctrines. I needed Jesus.
Right.
And so that's what literally happened.
How did you feel after that?
That weight that was on my shoulders, that yearning, that longing for something more in life was just gone. It was as if I knew I was a child of God, as if I knew that the God of the Bible was the true God. And so that pretty much started a whole nother journey that took a very long time.
So what happened after that? Do you have anything to share? How did you grow in your faith? How did you become more,
Yes.
or you went to depth in the Bible and theology and understanding God and Jesus?
Yes. It wasn't until I met Jehovah's Witnesses. They were telling me about their view. I met them when I was locked up because now my warrants that I had in my previous life, even before Islam started to appear, started to come. It was as if God was protecting me. He knew I was going to go to jail. I was going to go to jail no matter what. It was just a matter of, am I going to go to jail as a Muslim? Came out more harder, more just angry at the world? Or do I go to jail with a purpose and a plan that has been set forth in the motion? So when I was in jail, I was very evangelistic, telling people about Jesus. I mean, I'm literally seeing guys crying, and privately, they weren't crying around everybody else. But, you know, when I kind of would go to a certain bathroom, I see grown men just in tears, crying. And at that moment, I can encourage them and let them know that despite how long it may be, it's only going to be a blink of an eye, to trust in God, that whatever difficulty you're going to go through, you will see your daughter again. Stuff like that, just little encouraging words to certain individuals as it came along. So
God, if He prepared you for that moment.
Yeah. So I will have to say yes, because there's really no other explanation. Because when I went to jail, there was a piece on my shoulders, literally a piece. I remember being extradited to the state of Wisconsin. I'm from Illinois. Being extradited to another state, and that was the longest car ride in my life. And the entire time, I was in tears because I thought my career, my life, everything was ruined. But I had a sense of peace, I had a sense of joy that overflooded my emotions. And I knew this what God wanted for my life. So, and then it wasn't until I was there that I began to study apologetics and, you know, basic Christianity. What is Christianity? I knew Jehovah's Witnesses were wrong. I knew Islam was wrong. I just couldn't pinpoint certain things just yet until I studied, you know. And
did you get a degree in theology?
Later in life, oh man, my journey it's like very long. Okay, because I was eventually I got out of jail. I went back to community college. I wanted to study art because I'm an artist by natural gifting, I guess. And so I was doing art, but my art teacher told me to stop talking about God to everybody. And so that became really depressing for me because it's like, that's all I knew. All my artwork became about some form of a way for me to talk about Jesus. Everything became about Jesus. And so I knew at that moment when they threatened to throw me out of the program that I was done with art. And so I went to the computer, looked up Bible colleges, and lo and behold, Moody Bible Institute was like 45 minutes away from where I lived, and it's paid tuition. So free sounds pretty good to me at that time, especially being broke. And so I applied. Well, I sent for like 4 or 5 applications for Moody because I was afraid to apply right away because I was afraid of rejection. And so one time I finally applied. I sent an overnight delivery and I got my acceptance letter telling me I was accepted into Moody Bible Institute, and my just floodgated with tears of joy and happiness. Finally, something in my life made sense. And that began a whole nother journey too, because my second year at Moody, literally I woke up blind. I couldn't see no more, and so eventually later diagnosed with MS. And so it's another battle, but the Lord is teaching me how to rely upon Him in so many ways in which I would have never dreamed of before. So, yep. And I graduated.
You graduated.
I stumbled across the stage. But I walked across the stage, and it was one of the biggest accomplishments to my point in life at that time. There's so much more God has in store for me, and I'm just pursuing Him now with joy and with happiness, and I'm very evangelistic, telling everybody and every Muslim I see about Jesus. So,
amen to that. Going back, just a few questions about your journey to Islam. Mm-hmm. Why you think, I'm sure you met people who converted to Islam.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And can you give me a summary why they convert to Islam? Are they similar? Did you find similar stories to yours? It just people are seeking God, but seeking Him in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like, can you talk about it a little bit?
Some of the individuals that I've later met that converted to Islam was very much similar to mine. Just the hardships of life, the depression, stuff like that, and they needed something more in life, and so they became a Muslim. Some people that I've met that became Muslims, some just got super integrated into the culture. They really got immersed in the Islamic culture, stuff like that. Those are the people who are the most interesting, because I'm just like, you're a Caucasian guy with a full beard and all this stuff, and I'm just like, well.
Do you think?
I don't know.
I just want to understand, basically what happens to people that. I left Islam and I grew up as in the heart of Islam, I left it, and it always surprises me when I see somebody who's living in the West and trying to go back to
the 7th century.
Exactly. And for me, it puzzles me all the time.
Well, it puzzles me now. It puzzles me because I'm just like, why are we supposed to go back to the 7th century? Like, I honestly, the psychological reasons, I couldn't really tell you, as to why. Well, because the whole thing is they're trying to imitate Muhammad and everything, I can remember putting on my pants a certain way, always the right side first, always this stuff first. Oh, I was trying these things that I would read about. Then I was like, okay, I have to do this now. I have to do that. I have to do this. I have to do something else. It wasn't as if just, Allah, do you love me? Just something basic. I needed a hug from God to tell me I'm His child, and just wasn't there for me in Islam. So.
And another question, did you receive any follow-up from Muslim leaders, sheikhs, imams, or just like the as if they gained one more to
Pretty much. And that was it. Pretty much I said my shahada, and he probably went home that day super proud of himself that he converted a Muslim, that he converted a westernized guy. He probably even categorized me as a Christian, even though I was not a Christian, and so he just chalked one more for his bag, and so I didn't know anything about Islam. The most individuals, I say a majority of everybody that I've met that converted to Islam had no idea about Islam, let alone Christianity, but yet they speak against Christianity. They know nothing of Christianity, and a few individuals that I've actually confronted in their face personally, like a Yusuf Estate, I literally confronted him about his lies until I was escorted away. He told me he doesn't do debates. I wasn't there to debate him.
Right.
I was there to embrace him and say, there's some things you got wrong, man. Let me tell you about what you got wrong. But he didn't have it. So, what can I do?
One last thing. Can you share a word with people who are probably like you, being deceived by the appearance of Islam as an appealing religion or path to God,
Yeah.
what do you tell them?
Study, read. This whole idea that Islam is peaceful religion's not true. You know, I could give you a litany of books, scholars, Muslim books, their hadith that shows how barbaric it really is. And I would tell these people who are on their spiritual journeys, you know, it's okay to study different religions, but know what these religions are about before you jump in head feet and all of a sudden you're in a full burqa and, you know, you're doing all this stuff and you not know anything about what you're getting yourself into. Because I spoke to many Muslimas and who are westernized, but they knew nothing of Islam, but yet they got the full burqa on and they're doing all this stuff, and my heart is breaking. I'm just like, girl, do you know what Islam really teaches? You know, and 99.9% of the time, they don't know whatsoever. So.
Well, thank you, Brother Antonio.
Thank you for having me.